Happy Sabbath, LondonLive. Great to have all of you online. Another week gone by of sort of semi-lockdown, but another week of online church. I just want to sort of take a moment to reflect on the past few weeks. We've been really lucky and really blessed with great weather, the opportunity to meet together in a park in Holland Park, to catch up with friends and other members of our church who we haven't seen for many months, just to hear about everyone's stories, everyone's experiences of lockdown, some of the stresses but some of the joys of it too. We've also had a great opportunity to reconnect with each other online via Zoom. We have this sort of chats and pray group on Tuesday nights. If you ever want to participate, just send a message to one of us and get involved as well. It's been a great opportunity to actually get things off of our chests that you might not even realise were pressing on our minds, worries and concerns, but also taking stock of the many blessings that we have in our lives. And moving on, today we've got the last part of Pastor Matthew Herel's 4-part series on race and privilege, specifically how Jesus experienced those in his life and how he also basically shared his message and God's message of equality, of love, with no strings attached. Matthew's sermons over the past few weeks have been really deep and really insightful, and it's definitely brought to my attention and to my understanding of what it was like sort of in Jesus' shoes and the way he actually went about things, but as more importantly helped me to see how I can make an impact in our community and my work and in life. So without further ado, we'll get over to the worship team.
We So Kira, for the benefit of anyone who doesn't know, Kira's my wife, and Kira used to struggle to choose gifts for me when it was like birthday or Christmas. She used to struggle to pick gifts for me, not because she's not creative and stuff, but she would tell you that I'm particular to the point of being impossible.
Yes.
I would tell you I just like what I like. And so there are, I can see my sister, I keep out of it, sis. And so there were times when she would get me a gift for my birthday or for Christmas, and I don't think I was quite as enthusiastic about the gift as she hoped that I would be. And so naturally she'd be a little bit disappointed. But one year she got me this really cool Superman sign. It was like a neon Superman sign, and I just thought it was so cool. I just loved it so much. Like I was so happy. Maybe it's a bit nerdy, I don't care. I just absolutely was made up with this thing. I was so happy. And then when I looked at her, I saw that she was so happy too, because she was just feeling really pleased that she got something that made me happy. And I think that she was as happy, if not more happy than me. And that's the thing with giving great gifts. It's not enough for a gift to be something nice. It has to be something nice for them. It has to be something special for them, for the person, something that shows that you really understand them, something that shows that you really know them. That's what makes it special, ultimately. And there's another side to that coin, because when you've known someone for a long time and there is like an assumed level of closeness, a certain level of intimacy that's assumed, if you give them a gift that isn't really a reflection of who they are and what their tastes are and what they like, it can come across as being a bit thoughtless. It can actually come across as a little bit inconsiderate. Like in some instances, it can even come across as sometimes being a little bit hurtful, because a poorly chosen gift really can make the recipient feel that even after all this time, you don't even know me. And so that's the thing with gifts. When you get it right, it's great. But when you get it wrong, it's bad. Now, generally speaking, over the course of the last month, we've been focusing on the collection of writings in the Bible that we know as the New Testament. It's the second section of the Bible. But I want to start today by looking at a passage in the Old Testament, which is also known as the Hebrew Scriptures. And the passage that I want to reflect on for a little bit is a passage taken from a book authored by a prophet called Amos. And Amos is a man who is commonly known as a shepherd, but this is actually slightly wide of the mark. Amos was actually a sheep breeder, so he bred animals. And the word that's used to refer to Amos's profession, it's only actually used one other time in the whole Bible. It crops up again somewhere else in the Old Testament in the book known as the second book of the Kings. And it's referring to a man named Mesha. And Mesha was the king of Moab, and he supplied the king of Israel at that time with 100,000 lambs and 100,000 ram's fleeces. So this is a lot of units that we're talking about. And so we don't know exactly the amount of units that Amos, the sheep breeder, was dealing with, but we know that the same word is used to describe him. And I really think this is an important detail, because I think generally, when we think about a prophet, we either picture someone like Kane from Kung Fu, that old program that used to cover. We picture someone like Kane from Kung Fu who's just wandering as a nomad with like no fixed abode and nothing but the clothes on their back. Or we think of someone who works within like the temple system, someone that works within the religious system, like a religious firebrand, and all they do is serve God and the people of God. But Amos is neither of those things. Amos is a man with his own business. He might even be like a little bit prosperous. He's someone that's established in life. Amos, as prophets go, is relatable. And so Amos comes from Judah, but his words are for all Israel. You see, about 150 years prior to when Amos is sharing his messages, the 12 tribes that comprised the nation of Israel had fractured. and they formed 2 separate kingdoms. And so 10 of the 12 tribes, they broke away and they formed what would become the northern kingdom, and they retained the name Israel. And the 2 remaining tribes of Benjamin and Judah, they formed the southern kingdom, which would be known as Judah. And so relations between these 2 kingdoms could sometimes be a little bit fractious. And it's important that we understand that this was a split engineered by the people of God, not by the God of the people. So when God gave Amos a message for Israel, God isn't talking about the northern kingdom that's now referred to as Israel. God is talking about the combined 12 tribes, both of these kingdoms, with whom he originally instituted a covenant relationship. And so Amos, he starts his entreaty, he starts this book that we call the Book of Amos, he starts it by denouncing all of the surrounding countries for all of the wrongdoing that they've been doing. He's calling out all of the surrounding countries for how they're treating other nations. And so he says things like, Syria and Ammon, you have ruthlessly crushed the land of Gilead. And Gaza, the home of the Philistines, and Tyre, you have taken entire communities into exile. And Edom, the people of the mountains, you have destroyed your kinsmen. And Moab, you desecrate the bodies of your enemies. This is just the ultimate disrespect to humankind. And no doubt that the people of Israel, they would have been listening to this condemnation, listening to Amos speak, and they'd be nodding their heads. Yeah, you tell them, Amos, yeah, put them in their place, yeah. I never liked those Edomites. But then in a change of direction, Amos declares, and as for you, Israel, you're even worse, because you've rejected God. This would be something like if you were to call up and have a rant on like LBC Talk Radio or something, you know, the kind of people who call up and rant. And if you were to call up and go on LBC and you'd be like, America, what a total shambles. I mean, President Trump is just out of control, and China, they're setting up concentration camps to oppress their own people. It's terrible. And Saudi Arabia, they've got a laundry list of human rights violations, and Russia, Putin silences the press, and everyone will be driving in their cars and listening in the radio and waving their fists and agreeing, yeah, that's right, you told them, yeah, that's right. And England, they're even worse. Yeah, huh? Because it's easy to point fingers at the things that other countries and other communities are doing. But it's uncomfortable when those fingers start pointing in your own direction. And that's exactly what Amos does. He's like, Syria and Ammon and Gaza and Edom and Moab, you're all guilty of committing violations against your fellow man. But Israel, my people, my home, my heritage, your crimes are against God. You've rejected his laws and his statutes, and as an extension of the fact that you've turned from God, you've been trampling the poor in the dust. You've pushed the afflicted out of the way. You've overlooked the most vulnerable people in society. And then Amos, speaking for God and with the Spirit of God, he starts listing all of the ways that God had tried to get his people's attention. While they were being unjust and discriminatory, while they were putting profits above people, while they were worshipping idols that they made with their own hands, rather than the God who made heaven and earth. Because God had been trying to get his people's attention. He was trying to send them reminders and wake-up calls and messages in various ways. And so God said, I withheld the rain from you. Just before the harvest, when rain is most crucial, in fact, I would actually send rain to all of the neighbouring cities. It was just your cities that didn't get it. And this was a wake-up call to make you realise, oh man, we need God to provide for us. It should have made you as a society turn back to me, and I would have blessed you, but you didn't do that. And so I sent blight to affect some of your crops. And again, this was a nudge to make you remember, oh man, we need God to take care of us. It should have made you as a society turn back to me, and then I would have blessed you, but you didn't do that. So then I withdrew my divine protection, and other nations were then able to come and start drama with you. And this was meant to be like a klaxon going off in your ears and in your minds. Oh man, we need God's protection all around us. And it should have made you as a community turn back to me, and I would have blessed you and protected you, but you didn't do that. You didn't prioritize the things that were important to me. Justice and fairness and mercy and kindness. These were the things that I wrote into the Constitution that I gave you when I set you up as a nation. Remember when I told you that if somebody poor borrows money from you and they put up their coat as collateral because they literally don't have anything else of any value, then when night time comes, give them their coat back. Something so simple, I told you. But you don't do that. Or remember when I told you as a people that when harvest time comes and you're harvesting your crops, make sure you leave an area all around the perimeter of your field that you don't harvest. Leave that little bit for the poor who live where you live. Leave it for the widows who don't have anybody to farm for them, for the orphans who don't have anybody to care for them. Let them come and let them eat food. It's a simple thing. But you don't do that. Or remember when I told you that officials and civic leaders should never, ever, in any circumstances, take bribes, because bribes tip things in the favour of the haves and they discriminate against the have-nots. They are like a cancer that eats away at justice and fairness from the inside. Avoid it at all costs. But you don't do that. And so Amos is sharing the things that God has put on his heart, and he's speaking to the very heart of civic society, the very heart of public life. And this must have stung the people, because it hurts when the flaws in your society, when the flaws in your group or your community are exposed. It hurts, it stings. But at least in their minds, they could maybe fall back on their religious commitment to God. Maybe in their minds they could fall back on the outward workings of their faith, fall back on their rituals and their ceremonies and their acts of worship. Maybe while Amos was speaking, they were even turning and whispering and saying to one another, okay, hands up. We've got some things that we need to work on as far as how we relate to each other, as far as how we help one another. But at least we can rely on how we relate to you, Lord God. At least we can rely on how we worship you and how we keep all the religious festivals and how we worship together regularly in our assemblies and we make all the necessary offerings and bring our gifts to you. And we're constantly looking forward towards the day of the Lord. The day of the Lord was a day, an event that Israel was constantly looking towards. And we find the first reference of the day of the Lord here in the book of Amos. But it's apparent that whilst this is the first reference for the modern reader, it's a concept that seems to be very familiar to the original audience. Everybody was looking forward to this game-changing, life-changing, world-changing event. The day that God was going to intersect with earthly reality in a tangible and material way. The king, the heavenly king of Israel, was going to come and fortify the earthly kingdom of Israel. And so in their minds, this was going to be like the ultimate nationalistic version of my dad's bigger than your dad. And so the people had been eagerly and anticipating and awaiting the day of the Lord. It was going to be like the best thing ever. But Amos has some devastating news for the people. What sorrow awaits you who say, if only the day of the Lord were here? You have no idea what you are wishing for. That day will bring darkness, not light. In that day, you will be like a man who runs from a lion only to meet a bear. Escaping from that bear, he leans his hand against the wall in his house and he's bitten by a snake. Yes, The day of the Lord will be dark and hopeless, without a ray of joy or hope. I hate all your show and pretense, the hypocrisy of your religious festivals and solemn assemblies. I will not accept your burnt offerings and grain offerings. I won't even notice all your choice peace offerings. Away with your noisy hymns of praise. I will not listen to the music of your harps. Instead, I want to see a mighty flood of justice, an endless river of righteous living. You're looking forward to this day in the future, the day of the Lord. And you think that all you have to do is focus on that day, speak about that day, tell people about that day. You're looking forward to the day in the future when I'm going to establish justice and liberty for all. But you're not doing anything in the present to show that you actually care about justice and liberty for all. Because all you do is think about this day in the future. Let me worry about justice and liberty and equality in the future. That's my business. You need to worry about it now. That's your business. Because if I'm coming to execute justice in the future and you're on the wrong side of justice, the day of the Lord is going to be a bleak day for you. God is telling his people, when you focus on nothing but your weekly worship activities and your offerings, it's actually offensive to me. When you have no interest in the plight of your fellow man and you're not doing anything to counteract systems of oppression and to push back against racial inequality and financial inequality, but you obsess over worship and liturgy and ceremony. Your songs of praise are like empty noise. I hate it. If all you do is focus on the day of the Lord in the future at the expense of making a real world difference now and making people's lives better and fairer now, then the day of the Lord isn't going to be a good day for you. Running from problems in the world around you and pining for the day of the Lord will be like fleeing from a lion and running into a bear. These people thought that by yearning for the day of the Lord and coming together to worship and keeping their Sabbaths and giving their offerings, that they were making God happy. And God's response is basically, do you not even know me? It would be like if my parents really wanted like a 4K HD 80-inch television and their neighbours have just had one delivered. And so I decide to break into my neighbour's house under cover of night and I steal that brand new television and like it's still got the wrapping paper on it. It was a gift from a wife to a husband and it's still got the gift tag, Happy Birthday Peter. And I was to take that television and give it to my parents, expecting them to love it because it's what they wanted. And they would say, we hate this gift. It's offensive to us. If you think that this is what we want, we have to question whether you know us at all. And I'd be like, but guys, you always wanted this television. The television isn't the problem. We don't hate televisions, we like television, but not like this. Not at this cost, not while someone else is unhappy. So if you wanted to give us an expensive television, then first of all, make sure that your wife is looked after. Make sure that you're being faithful to God and to the church with your giving. Make sure that you're helping those in your immediate circle who have very real and apparent material needs. Think about maybe supporting some local charitable organisations that are making a difference. And if after you've done all of that, you still choose to give us a television, that would just be the most wonderful gift. Because in those circumstances, the real gift is you. Your devotion, your fidelity, your commitment to our values. It's a demonstration that you really understand who we are, what our values are and what we're about. For Israel, the people of God, gathering together to worship was a good thing. God told them to do it. Keeping their religious festivals, including the Saturday Sabbath, a weekly commitment to God, it was a good thing. God told them to do it. Bringing their offerings and their sacrifices and their gifts was a good thing. God told them to do it. Singing hymns and praise songs was a good thing. God told them to do it. They're all good things. But for God, if they aren't done simultaneously with letting justice roll down like waters, and if they aren't synchronized with letting righteousness roll like an ever-flowing stream, then they're bitter, they're odious, they're insulting. Jesus would pick up this same thread in the New Testament, in the first gospel, the Gospel of Matthew, the first of the 4 biographies of his life. And in the last few days before his crucifixion, Jesus was sharing some of his most important teachings because he knows that he doesn't have much time left. And so there's this one particular teaching, and he starts off by saying, when the Son of Man comes in his glory. When the Son of Man comes in his glory. This is the day of the Lord. This is the same time, the same event that he's talking about. And the expression, the Son of Man, this is basically Jesus speaking about himself in the third person. It's a self-referential term. He's referring to himself as the Son of Man because it reflects the fact that he's a representative of humanity. And so Jesus says that on that day, when the Son of Man comes in his glory, everyone is going to be in one of two camps. And Jesus says, I'm going to say to the people at my right, enter into this new kingdom that I'm establishing. Because when I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. And when I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. And when I was a stranger, you welcomed me. And when I was naked, you clothed me. When I was sick, you took care of me. When I was in prison, you came to look for me. And Jesus says that those people on my right, they will say, Lord, when did we do any of these things? We didn't see you. I mean, we believed with all of our hearts and we wanted to see you so desperately, even just a glimpse, but we never did. And Jesus tells them, well, when you clubbed together and you made a meal for hungry people who were down on their luck, you did it for me. When you travelled to visit someone who was sick, even though it was a long journey and you could only wave hello at them through the window for 30 seconds because of social distancing, you did it for me. When you called an elderly person a couple of times a week to make sure they weren't too lonely because they can't come out their house in current circumstances, you did it for me. And it's not that your actions have earned your way into my kingdom, but your actions have demonstrated for everybody to see that your values are the same as my values. And your heart is the same as my heart. And that harmony makes my kingdom work. And then Jesus says he'll turn to those who are at his left side and he'll say to them, I was hungry and you didn't feed me. I was a stranger and you ignored me. I was naked. I was sick. I was lonely. I was in prison and you didn't do anything. And they'll say, but Lord, what do you mean? We didn't see you. Genuinely, we believed with all of our hearts. We wanted to see you. That's why we were in church so much. That's why we planned so many events and services and convocations and assemblies, because we wanted to see you. And Jesus says to them, but you had a whole world around you that was hurting. And they needed help. And not we'll help you but on our terms. Not we'll help you but only if you come to our church. They needed no strings attached help. And you didn't help them. You didn't see what was around you because you only focused on what was ahead of you. The day of the Lord, a day of justice and liberty and freedom, is both a relief and a thrill for those who are currently striving for justice and liberty and freedom. It's like if you take someone who loves football to their first football match. The experience is amazing for them because it's an amplification of all the things that they already love. So the noise and the energy that they're used to on TV is nothing compared to the noise and the energy being inside the stadium. And seeing a fraction of the play like they're used to on TV is nothing compared to seeing the whole pitch and the whole game played out in front of you. And watching the match with a couple of friends in your living room is nothing compared to being surrounded by like 60,000 people who are all screaming and cheering and desiring the same thing as you. But if you take someone who has no interest in football to this football match, they're going to say, this is boring. Why is it so loud? Why is this man behind me literally screaming in my ear? I had to queue up for 20 minutes just to go to the toilet. How long does this last for? 90 minutes? They're going to hate it because it's not what they're about. God is eradicating things that plague our society. Racism, inequality, oppression, exploitation, poverty. God's plan is to eradicate those things. And so the day of the Lord is a triumph for those who share the same values and have the same priorities as God. But it holds nothing for people who don't share those values and for people for whom those things aren't a priority. Our church, and I'm talking about our world church as an organisation, like virtually every other Protestant church that I know of, is waiting eagerly for the day of the Lord. The day when Jesus promised that he will come and will intersect with earthly reality in a tangible and material way. A day when he's promised that he will make all things new. A day when we will be reunited with our loved ones who passed away, but in their lives they knew God and God knew them. Our church is actually longing for that day so much that our church founders even chose to include a reference to it in our name. We are known as Adventists because we are looking forward to the advent, to the arrival, to the second coming of Jesus. And much of what we do revolves around the advent. Preaching about the advent, teaching about the advent, singing about the advent. But Jesus is calling us, just like Amos called Israel, not to focus exclusively on the then at the expense of trying to level the playing field now. Not to fixate on Jesus executing justice and liberty in the future when we can actually be trying to help promote justice and liberty today. And so here in our church, Acts, our own little church, we are committed to the outwardly religious things, the worship things, but we can't be exclusively committed to those things. That's the religiosity that God hates. So we're also committed to the practical things, to social justice and transformation. Now, there are 4 tiers to change making in society. You have relief, individual development, community development, and advocacy, or what we can also call structural change. So relief means, this man in my community is hungry, let me give him a fish. Individual development means, let's give him a fishing rod and teach this man how to fish for himself. Community development means, let's register people for a free fishing workshop within this community and let's train the man who we taught to fish so he can be one of the teachers. And advocacy means, let's write to our local MP to fight to keep our local waters clean from pollution. Let's lobby the government to put fishing classes on the school curriculum. Now, the advocacy level is the level that really allows you to make the most change for the most people, and that's where we aim for. But it can take time to build up the human resource and the skill set needed to be able to get to that advocacy stage. So you start with relief, because people on the ground still need to be helped today, and you strive to work up the chain. And so currently as a church, we're engaging in relief the ways that we can, and we've got a couple of things in the pipeline working towards individual development, but it takes a little time. Building always takes a little bit of time. But I'm sharing this because I really want you to know, both those of us who are already committed to being a part of our church family and those who are joining us for the first time or have been dipping in and worshipping with us, I want you to know the direction that we are moving in. But I also want it to be clear that we can only get there with total commitment. We need everybody to be willing to do something. And it might not even be the things that you like doing, but there's still things that need to be done. So for those who have already chosen and made a decision to be part of our Acts Church family, then I just want to issue a call to arms once again. We need all of you. So let's get to work. And for anybody who's joining us from a bit further afield than East London, where we're based, there are things that you can do too. Because even when we do go back to meeting physically in person, we still want to be able to maintain an online presence. And so I guess the most important thing that you can do really is to pray for us. That God will give us the vision and the clarity and the strength and the boldness to be able to achieve these things for him. But you can also lend us any skills that you have that aren't limited by distance. So if you have any digital skills, if you have creative art skills, if you have professional services. Because the vision that we have as a church is all of us working together to do what we can to increase justice and equality and liberty, the things that God loves. So that on that day of the Lord, when Jesus comes back, we won't be running from a lion into a bear, living out the words of the prophet Amos. But instead, we'll be living out the words of the prophet Isaiah, a prophet who came after Amos and who built on his legacy, a prophet who dedicated his life to looking to the day of the Lord in the future, but to trying to improve society's present. And Isaiah declared this: "It will be said that on that day, lo, this is our God. We have waited for him so that he might save us. This is the Lord for whom we have waited. Let us be glad and rejoice in his salvation." It's my prayer that on the day of the Lord, that's what we'll be able to say.
You are not a God created by human hands. You are not a God dependent on any mortal man. You are not a God in need of anything we can give by your plan. You are not a God dependent on any mortal man. You are not a God in need of anything we can give by your plan. That's just the way it is. You are God alone from before time began. You are on your throne. You are God alone. And right now, in the good times and bad, you are on your throne. You are God alone. Oh, I love this next verse. You're the only God. Here we go. You're the only God whose power none can contend. You're the only God whose name and praise will never end. You're the only God who's worthy of everything we can. You are God. You are God. That's just the way it is. You are God alone from before time began. You are on your throne. You are God alone. And right now, the good times and bad, you are on your throne. You are God alone. You're unchangeable, 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 unstoppable. That's who you are. You're unchangeable, 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 unstoppable. That's who you are. You are God alone from before time began. You are on your throne. You are God alone. And right now, in the good times and bad, you are on your throne. You are God alone. If you believe this, repeat after me. You're unchangeable, unchangeable, unstoppable. That's who you are. You're unchangeable, unchangeable, unstoppable. That's who you are. That's your turn. You're unchangeable. That's my God. Unchangeable. That's my God. Unstoppable. That's who you are. That's who you are. You're unchangeable, unshakable, unstoppable. That's who you are. You are God. You are God. That's right. Before time began, you are on your throne. You are God alone. You are God alone. And right now, in the good times and bad, you are on your throne. You are God alone. You are God. You are God alone. From before time began, you are on your throne. You are God alone. And right now, in the good times and bad, you are on your throne. You are God alone. Amen.
Thank you for joining us for another week of online church. Really hope that you took something from today's message, as well as today's songs and hymns, all of which really do make me feel like I'm back in church. Hopefully we'll all be back together as normal soon. In the meantime, as many of you know, friends and family that have also been affected by the pandemic and the impact on the economy as well, We can also take this time and this opportunity to give back and give to those who need it most. The details will be popping up on the screen shortly for our hardship fund. If you just put in the reference hardship or hardship fund, we'll allocate that money to those that need it most. As well, if you've felt that you've sort of gained or benefited from this church, please support our efforts by sending in whatever you can, whatever you feel that you can, with just the reference of offering. And equally, if you've got tithes, if you want to give back to the church and the wider sort of structure that's there, please put in the reference tithe. We're really blessed to have this church, to have so many passionate people that have given so much time to really be there for one another. If there's anything that you are struggling with or need help and support with, please reach out to us, send us a message, give a call to any of us, and we'll be there and do what we can as well. So as well, we've got a Zoom catch-up call after the service, so basically now, with the Zoom ID 255-255-2001, and as usual, if you need the password, just message one of us on Instagram, Facebook, and we'll get that to you. Have a blessed Sabbath, have a great week, and we'll see you soon.